every single day of the year.
Say a few words, Jack. Now's the time for good old Jack. Say a few words, Jack.
Now's the time.
That's a few words, Jack.
Home hardware, home of the handyman. BCTV, we're giving it all we got.
Good morning. It's hardly surprising to feel that among those citizens of Canada who take a detailed interest in federal politics, that many of them are highly cynical, if not disgusted, about what happens in the old boys' club, the House of Commons. I raise this because it's not going to go away. Was Bryce Mackasey, an ex-cabinet minister in the Liberal government, an ex-member of the MNA, was he the owner of a numbered company, which was acting as a paid lobbyist for a man called Harrison in Montreal, where his stature and privileges in the House of Commons adversely affected by stories run by the Montreal Gazette based on sworn testimony given in a court in Montreal. It's a messy business. But of course, when the all-party committee of the House of Commons finally brought down its decision, it was what is widely regarded as a whitewash. Only one member of that committee, who happened to be an NDP by the name of Rod Murphy, actually defended the right of the newspaper to publish, after doing everything possible to get reaction from the people affected, sworn testimony that Mackasey was a paid lobbyist while a member of the House of Commons. Mackasey has been cleared of criminal charges and technically cleared by the House of Commons. We're going to talk to Rod Murphy in an attempt to get at the actual facts in the Mackasey case this morning. That's one piece of business. Murphy is in Ottawa. Provincially, I cannot ignore the $185,000 pamphlet, more than a million of which are going out to the people of BC, or restraint and recovery. And in downtown Vancouver today, the BC Fed executive and Solidarity people are meeting very unhappily, fearful of some kind of double cross involving the teachers. Well, we'll get into that with Jack Heinrich briefly. But first I want you to see an edited extract of a clip from my interview with Bennett a few days back. And as you're saying, teachers must work additional days to make up the pupil teaching lost in the strike.
I would expect them.
Is that right, sir?
Yes, and I would, Jack, I would expect that every parent and every student and every fair-minded person, now that this confrontation is over, would expect that our children, and that's the ones that everybody has been talking about protecting, that they would have restored to them the education that was lost and the educational days from those 3 days. And I don't think the teachers would withhold returning those days from their local school boards, and I don't think the local school boards would not be in a position to ask them to do that.
No reprisals of any kind by you?
Well, when you talk no reprisals, this is a time of healing. And our government employees were on a legal strike, and they settled, by bargaining, a collective agreement. This is a time of healing in which all parties coming out of this should be helping to build a better British Columbia.
That was what Bennett said to me on that program. We're going to interview Jack Heinrich briefly on the program this morning. But we're also going to see a guy you haven't seen in this program, or hear a guy you haven't seen in this program for many years, to bring us up to date on the labour strife in the United Kingdom, a fellow by the name of Webster, Drew Webster of Fleet Street in London. But first, Jack Heinrich, Minister of Education, after the break. Jack Heinrich, the Minister of Education, is on the phone very kindly to me from Prince George this morning, and I think it would be proper for me to say to you in another language, Mr. Heinrich, wie geht's?
Wie geht's?
Wie geht's?
Wie geht's? Ja.
Yeah, good? Oh, das ist wunderbar. Are you going on holiday to Germany tomorrow?
I am leaving tomorrow morning. This is as a guest of the Federal Republic of Germany. It's on a tour to examine the education system.
Oh, I thought it was a junket to the beer halls.
No, it's not a junket, and it's something which has been planned for some time as a guest of the Federal Republic. And there are 6 other Canadians going, 2 of whom are superintendents from the Lower Mainland, Burnaby and Vancouver.
Oh, good. Is the Speaker of the House going with you? No, Walter's not going, is he?
No, why would you ask that?
Oh, I just thought he might be going on the trip too, that's all.
No, not that I know of.
Oh, that's very good indeed. When do you get back?
December 22.
December 22nd, just in time for Christmas.
Yes.
Oh, I'm glad you'll be back with your family for Christmas. Meanwhile, it doesn't matter what happens to the educational tussle while you're away. Is that correct, Jack?
Well, I suppose what you're directing at is the fact that there is there could conceivably be a problem, which I doubt, while I'm away, and the question coming out of yesterday's press conference as a result of the decision which government has made was something which I don't think was unexpected. You must remember, Jack, that it was made very clear that the agreement that the funds saved would remain within the education...
Remain within the education system. It's just a pity that you're taking reprisals, really, against those teachers who crossed the picket lines and attempted to teach, and they're going to suffer too if the school boards do as you have undoubtedly made clear to them. Is it not a pity that these teachers who followed their bounden duty are going to suffer?
Well, who says that they're going to suffer?
Well, if you take away 3 professional days or whatever adjustment to give the total teaching time, you can't tell those teachers who are willing to work to stay home. Will they get extra pay?
Look, the understanding is that these solution must be presented to the Ministry of Education by the 15th of December. That is how they will make up the lost instructional time. How they go about it is entirely up to them.
Providing they have 188 days.
We're prepared to look at any solution presented by individual school boards for the recovery of that time. Jack, there's a fundamental principle here, and it's very difficult for me over the phone to...
I don't know why it should be.
Well, no, meet you head on with this particular item, but there's a fundamental principle. One, an agreement was entered into. The first point of that agreement was that the funds would remain within the system.
Oh, you're talking about the Monroe Agreement?
With the Premier, and the statement which was made on Sunday night.
The Kelowna meeting.
Correct. And
That's
it was
right.
made abundantly clear that the funds would remain within the system on the understanding that the lost instructional time would be recovered.
Well,
now, our very point is this. We cannot put the stamp of approval on activities which, in my view, were illegal by withdrawing those services during that period of time, and then suddenly have the surplus or the savings carried forward to 1984. Look, the funds were advanced by the taxpayers of British Columbia to our government in trust.
No, I understand it. Your position is clearly lucid, and the only trouble is that some of these silly leaders of the teachers are perhaps still upset, but that's beside the point, Jack. Have a good holiday.
Well, could I just leave one point, Jack, with it? Remember something on here. I believe that school boards, as employers, have a wish to take a positive approach to a resolution of this problem. I would think that their ingenuity, together with their local teachers, will certainly provide the children with the lost instructional time for which they're entitled and which we, as taxpayers, advance funds. I think they'll do that.
Well, just one little piece of advice is don't worry about it while you're on the junket. Okay?
Okay.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Bye-bye.
Freiliche, well, I forget Happy New Year in German. Freiliche Neues Jahr, I think. Down to more serious business. To Rod Murphy MP on the Mackasey case after the break. A 10-member committee of the House of Commons had a 7 months investigation into allegations as to whether or not Bryce Mackasey, a Liberal MP, was a paid lobbyist who received large sum of money, $400,000, to act ipso facto improperly on the behalf of a Montreal or a Quebec company called Les Ateliers, a machine tool company. And after this investigation, the only member of that committee who defended the right of the Montreal Gazette, which broke the story, was Rod Murphy of the NDP. Good morning, Mr. Murphy.
Good morning.
I would like, if you can be patient with me, to go through the basic facts. What was it that the Gazette first published, and where did they get the information?
Well, the Gazette published some stories in the middle of March. Basically, in the stories, and in very large headlines, they said that the president of the Montreal Board of Trade, which is, of course, the Chamber of Commerce there, had said that Bryce Mackasey was a paid lobbyist and that through a numbered company called 109-609 received money for lobbying on behalf of some companies in Quebec.
How much money?
Well, the amount of money that was talked about was $400,000.
And that came from this Quebec company. And was there evidence? Oh, that was. Where did they get that basic evidence? You know, and you can tell me.
Okay, as you know, Jack, they received most of that information by reading the transcript of the bankruptcy hearing, which had taken place a number of months earlier. There was no reporters at the bankruptcy hearing itself, but the Gazette, when it was researching another story, through its reporter William Marsden, came across this information. They also interviewed the officials that were at the bankruptcy hearing. They, in turn, verified the fact that Bryce Mackasey's name had been mentioned, although it didn't appear on the transcript. That portion of the transcript, Mr. Harrison, who was the president of the Board of Trade, the person that was testifying, had asked for the tapes to be turned off. One tape was turned off, and he did mention Bryce's name at that time.
As a paid lobbyist acting for his company.
Right. Now,
and that was testimony.
The sequence of events. There had been a number of questions by the trustee for the bankruptcy, trying to get the information as to who owned 109-609, and another set of questions asking who was doing the lobbying and who owned 109-609.
And what was the answer given in the bankruptcy hearing and oath as to who owned 109-609?
Well, the name that was mentioned was Bryce Mackasey. It was the only name that was mentioned. Now, what Mr. Harrison himself said afterwards is that he was referring to different questions when he gave Bryce Mackasey's name.
In other words, in front of the House of Commons Investigative Committee, did this man Harrison testify?
Yes, he did.
And did he deny then that he had said that Mackasey owned 109-609?
Yes, he did.
So we had two sets. First of all, a charge was laid against Mr. Mackasey in the Montreal courts. Is that correct?
That is also correct.
And what was the result of that that would be a criminal trial, was it?
Yes, it was actually a preliminary hearing, and the judge in that case, after hearing the evidence, and by the way, it's interesting that he did not interview Mr. Harrison himself. The judge in that case decided that there was no evidence to proceed to a full court hearing.
So therefore, Mr. Mackasey, on that charge, was cleared.
That's right. You have to remember that for anybody else in Canada, it's quite legal to lobby. However, for a member of Parliament, you can lobby, but you cannot become a paid lobbyist. And that's the charges that were against Bryce Mackasey.
Well, after he was cleared, was it not Mr. Mackasey himself who insisted on the continuation of the Parliamentary Investigative Committee?
Yes, he did.
Now, what happened at that particular hearing? Did Harrison testify?
Well, we had interviewed and had Mr. Harrison on as a witness prior to the actual court hearing.
Did Mr. Mackasey testify?
Mackasey testified, the Gazette testified twice, Mr. Harrison testified, officials of the Bank of Montreal, which were involved in this whole mess, testified, and the Commissioner Simmons of the RCMP testified. We had a number of witnesses before us in our investigation.
Is it correct, did it come out in evidence that Mackasey got a loan of $400,000 from the Bank of Montreal?
Well, what it was, because it's a bit more confusing than that, is that Bryce Mackasey, after speculating on the stock market, owed the Bank of Montreal approximately $625,000.
$625,000?
That's correct. The stocks had gone down in value and were worth approximately $178,000 at that time.
From $625,000 down to $178,000.
That's right. What happened is that the numbered company 109609 was created, and the record shows that the company was created for the purpose of finding a lobbyist to act on behalf of certain companies in Quebec, including Les Ateliers. The company went to the Bank of Montreal, purchased, you might say, from the Bank of Montreal the stocks that Bryce Mackasey had.
For how much?
For $400,000, which they were to pay the Bank of Montreal over, I believe, the next 4 years.
How much were the stocks worth at the time of the purchase?
About $178,000.
Yeah. Oh, I must transfer my account to the Bank of Montreal forthwith.
Well, when the Bank of Montreal was before the committee, I asked if that was the normal practice of the Bank of Montreal, and the officials there didn't seem to think that was normal practice.
They didn't seem to think it was normal practice. I want to get that quite clear. This came out in testimony. Mackasey owed the Bank of Montreal $625,000.
Yes, it didn't. All of the information did not come out when the Bank of Montreal was there. It came out as we interviewed more witnesses as the proceedings continued.
109609 was formed as a lobbyist vehicle of some kind.
That's right. That's the records of the company as to why it was set up.
And who bought the portfolio for $400,000? That portfolio, which was worth $178,000.
Well, it's the numbered company, which is 109609, which in turn we discovered to be owned by Robert Harrison.
That was that was what would you say, a non-profit deal for Mr. Harrison, was it not?
Well, in a strange way, it wasn't. He later on got possession of those stocks and sold them. He never did, through 109609, pay back the Bank of Montreal. So he did get the possession of those stocks for, I believe, approximately $22,000 in payments that were eventually made. In the meanwhile, the Bank of Montreal came out as the big loser. They lost the $400,000, and they also lost the stock security that they used to have, which is, of course, $178,000.
A kind of improvident deal, to say the least, by the Bank of Montreal.
Well, let's put it this way. They would have been better off in the long run to keep the stocks and go after Bryce Mackasey and try to get him to declare personal bankruptcy.
But they chose not to.
They chose not to.
I'd like to talk to you a little more, Rod Murphy, NDP MP. I don't even remember your constituency, though you've been on the program.
That's right. I was on the program about 2 years ago, and in the constituency's Churchill, which is northern Manitoba.
Hold on, Churchill.
Yep.
I'll be back with you, Mr. Murphy, after the break.
Okay.
Talking to Rod Mackay, the sole NDP member of the investigative committee. Isn't that right, Rod? Isn't that right, Rod?
Hello?
Talking to Rod Murphy, the sole NDP member of the committee which investigated Mackasey. How many Libs were on the committee, Rod?
Well, the Liberals had the majority of the committee, and then there was 3 Conservatives that attended the committee as well.
Now, did not the other 9 come to a unanimous decision?
Yes, I wouldn't say it was 9. It may have only been 8 in the room at the time, but there was no other abstention or negative vote or minority report other than my own.
And what was their decision? Their decision was that everything was copacetic and lovely and that the Gazette had impinged Mackasey's parliamentary privilege?
Well, I can read you the paragraph from their report, which I disagreed with.
Right.
This paragraph, your committee further concludes that the allegations reported by the Montreal Gazette have adversely affected the reputation of the honourable member for Lincoln, in other words, Bryce Mackasey, and through him, and this is the dangerous part, and through him, the privileges of the House of Commons.
In other words, they're condemning the Gazette. Is that correct?
Well, they're doing it in a very mild manner. They say the allegations reported by the Montreal Gazette, they never come out with a complete censure or any form of discipline. However, the fact is that they did find in their verdict against the Montreal Gazette.
What did you think in your report of the conduct of the Montreal Gazette, which had thoroughly researched, it would seem to me from what I know, and used, after attempting to get stories from everybody involved, reaction, the sworn testimony they had discovered in the bankruptcy court?
Well, that was the point I made. I do believe that it's possible for a newspaper or any other media to malign a member of the House of Commons to the effect that the privileges of the entire House are affected. However, in the case of the Gazette, they had not deliberately or maliciously set out to ruin his reputation. They had not been careless or cavalier in their research. They had given Mr. Mackasey and Mr. Harrison a chance to respond. For that matter, after they interviewed Harrison and Mackasey, they waited 6 days before they published the stories.
Matter of fact, it would seem to me that the Gazette was doing its bounden public duty by bringing to the attention of the public from faithful reporting of testimony on oath a matter of great public interest and concern.
That's right. I really feel, and I've stated so in my minority report, that the Gazette really had no other option but to print the story. They gave space to the denial by Mackasey. They gave space to the denial by Mr. Harrison from the Montreal Board of Trade, the main actor in all of this. Certainly, Mr. Mackasey's reputation was hurt. There's no question about that. But I do believe that the Gazette acted in the manner that they had to, that they gave on hand what was fairly balanced and certainly fair reporting of the testimony that they had before them, and backed up by the sworn statements of the officials who were at the bankruptcy hearing themselves.
A couple of points, to be fair to Mackasey. He testified in front of the committee.
Yes, he did.
On oath.
On oath.
Did he deny that he owned 109,609?
Yes, and I think one of the things that we always must remember is that he never did own 109,609.
That's the point I wanted you to make.
That's right. The stories in that one element are incorrect. The courts have decided that, so we really can't question it.
Who owned 109,609?
From the best of our ability and all the records, it would indicate that Robert Harrison, the person who mentioned Mackasey's name, was in fact the person who owned 109,609.
And it was Robert Harrison who took possession of the collapsed stock portfolio, having advanced $400,000 to whom?
The $400,000, as it turned out, was a reduction in the debt of Bryce Mackasey to the Bank of Montreal.
That sum of money was paid at one time, was it?
It was actually never paid. You see, what happened is that Bryce Mackasey owed this very large amount, $600,000 plus, to the Bank of Montreal. The Bank of Montreal, when they transferred their possession of Mr. Mackasey's stocks to 109,609, at the same time reduced Mr. Mackasey's debt to the Bank of Montreal by $400,000.
Yeah, in effect, the Bank of Montreal loaned $400,000 to the numbered company.
That's right. And
Well,
he got the stocks.
Was it a whitewash?
Well, I don't know what you can call whitewash.
Has the Gazette been sued? No.
No, the Gazette has not been sued by anybody, although I understand that Mr. Mackasey is still talking about doing such. Mr. Harrison has threatened them, and I believe has actually served some papers with regards to libel in his case. It will be very interesting to see whether that case actually goes forward. I don't think the court was the whitewash. I think with the evidence that was before him, the judge had no other choice.
No other course.
No other course of action.
Anyway, it was a kind of exercise which I must say, in the main, causes those members of the public who cared to take a detailed interest a fair amount of cynicism in the Old Boys Club.
Well, yes, I read Fotheringham's column, which certainly referred to it as an old boys club where people were scratching each other's back. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think the big problem was how you define the privileges of a member of Parliament. My definition was certainly in the exact opposite of the rest of the members of the committee, in that I believe that the privileges of a member of Parliament do exist, but in this specific case, there was certainly no evidence to indicate that the Gazette had misused their rights and their obligations as a member of the media to report a story which is well researched.
Hear, hear. And broadly speaking, of course, not referring to this case, there can be no blanket protection of members of Parliament or anybody else in the country, or members of Parliament, because in certain circumstances their parliamentary privilege might be affected. No blanket protection for any MP, correct?
There certainly can't be. Obviously, if a paper goes out to deliberately and maliciously libel or slander a member of Parliament to the extent that he or she can't do his or her work, then that is a breach of the House, as well as a breach of the individual.
But if it is honest reporting without malice in the public interest, that surely, under the Charter, if we still have one, is one of our freedoms.
That's right. The only other addition I would add is that if the paper had been careless or cavalier in its treatment of the reputation of Mr. Bryce Mackasey, then that would have been different. But they had not been. They had done their homework. They had given Mr. Mackasey a chance to reply.
In other words, there are two sources of potential punishment for a careless, sloppy newspaper which was malicious. One in the law courts, either for criminal libel or civil libel, and two in front of the House of Commons for damaging the privileges of that august body.
That is right, and I think that's a necessary extra protection.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
Rod newspapers or others slandering enough members of the House of Commons, then its ability to work is certainly going to be hampered.
My thanks to you, Rod Murphy from Churchill, Manitoba.
Okay.
Hope you solved that polar bear question up there.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Rod. I'm grateful for your information this morning.
Okay, you're welcome.
And I'll be
have a good winter out there.
Oh, yeah, no winter here.
In miserable Vancouver.
No winter, no polar bears.
Okay, bye-bye.
Couple of political polar bears.
I got a few dinosaurs down there, too.
That's right. We're both in contempt. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye. After the break, I'm not quite sure, but something exciting. Is Drew there? $441, Steve. 011441 735, etc. That's all right. Don't. 441. Free for all. I'm just trying to get through to my brother Drew in London about something else. But in the meantime, I've got a few things planned for this morning. I might even play a special request if MD asked me. A special request, disc jockey Webster. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Mr. Webster, I was wondering what you think of the Francis Fox case. It's somewhat similar.
The what?
Francis Fox case, where he admitted committing forgery in the...
Vastly different set of circumstances entirely and whatsoever. That was where he signed somebody else's name for that abortion business. But nobody, it wasn't accused, it didn't affect his privileges in the House of Commons, or was not alleged to have affected his privileges in the House of Commons.
No,
that is a case which is now buried and as dead as the dodo. Don't like it, but, you know, you can't go back forever. Go ahead, please.
Yes, the only problem with the NDP is to think up some good policies instead of trying to ruin people's reputations all the time. I think that maybe they get somewhere.
Ma'am, get your head out from underneath the sand. I hate these people who decide facts on the basis of political party philosophies. And he's on. Is that my brother Drew? Oh, hello, Drew.
Yes, boy.
Well, why don't you speak when you're spoken to?
I'm telling Jan to switch on the television so she can get latest news on the dispute.
Oh, you're at home in Methley Street, are you?
I'm a self-employed writer, Jack, you know.
Yeah, you're now in gracious kind of semi-retirement, Drew.
Oh, it's not semi, it's just like working.
Just like working. Drew, I wanted to phone you this morning. By the way, we showed you a picture with your top hat again.
Good man.
Is that allowed?
You'll be.
Drew, I was quite staggered by the riots the other day in London where 2,000 police are out battling a bunch of printers because of Maggie Thatcher's new laws. What's happening?
Well, let me explain, Jack. The events are taking place in Warrington, a town in Lancashire, 200 miles from London. But in London, the courts are being kept busy with writs, and the House of Commons this afternoon has been in uproar with a clash between the new leader of the opposition, Mr. Kinnock, and Mrs. Thatcher.
What are the laws that she has passed which have caused this trouble, or what are the circumstances?
Sorry, Jack?
What law did she pass? Did she ban all secondary picketing?
Yes, we've had a law now for a couple of years which lays it down that you can picket outside your own factory, but you don't rush around causing trouble at other people's factories.
Now, in Warrington, Lancashire, it's a newspaper plant of some kind, is it?
Yes, it's a Mr. Eddie Shaw who prints what we call free newspapers in this country, and he does it most successfully. And although he did support a closed shop policy some time ago, he has now gone over to employing non-union labour. And that's what caused the trouble. 6 union members went on strike. He fired them, and since then the fur has been flying.
But this particular operation had not been a closed shop plant. It was a new plant, wasn't it?
Yes, in other plants he did observe the closed shop, then he opened one with non-union labour, and that's what caused the trouble. Of course, it's really a political fight, because the government are quite determined that they will not intervene in the dispute, claiming that there are plenty of recognised channels for negotiation, and asking the Labour Party to condemn what is going on at Warrington.
And will the Labour Party, in your professional opinion, do such a thing?
Sorry?
Will the Labour Party do such a thing?
No, it will not. It will condemn violence, but it will not, as yet, urge the NGA picketers to leave the plant alone.
Well, this is a most...
The street has been in its usual state of disorder. The dispute involving 6 men in Lancashire shut down the entire national newspapers for a couple of days. Then half of the papers reappeared and half of them stayed out. Now they're all back, but they are suing the union for money back, for the money they lost.
This is a much tougher attitude than used to exist in the United Kingdom, is it not?
Oh yes, the Tory governments do believe in trying to regulate the unions and to keep them under control.
Well, now, do you think Maggie's right or wrong?
The view of most people here is that the unions display too much strength. For instance, Jack, you'll be interested to know that although there are newspapers in Fleet Street equipped with the machinery to produce newspapers much more cheaply, the unions will not do so. And this union we're talking about, the National Graphical Association, is scared out of its wits at the moment that they're going to lose lots of jobs because of the new technology.
So the new technology may be sitting in a plant, but the...
Fined almost £250,000. The funds of the union, worth about £11 million, have been frozen or sequestrated. The union is still in contempt of court, and Lord Denning this afternoon, a distinguished retired judge, said that if the union doesn't toe the line, it may die because it will have no money with which to operate.
You're telling me that the £11 million of the NGA union funds have been frozen?
That's right.
And Denning...
your old union, the National Union of Journalists, which is currently in dispute with Mr. David Dimbleby, the television commentator who owns a small newspaper group. There's a problem there as well, and it's reported today that the NUJ is trying to get its funds out of the country to protect them from being sequestrated.
In other words, get them away from the courts, or the courts will freeze you, break you, and bankrupt you and the union.
Precisely.
That sounds pretty rugged, I'll tell you.
It is tough.
Okay, Drew, what else is new in the old country?
Has got most of his papers printed for the week, and things may quieten down. But unless better views can prevail and conciliation take place, we'll be back in this situation again next week when at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, when he tries to get his vans out to deliver his papers, thousands of pickets will once again be confronted by police, some of them wearing the riot gear and prepared to be very strong to keep the law upright.
Who faces that threat? All of the proprietors or only some?
No, at the moment it's isolated to this one situation. This is like a test case under the new law. Everybody's watching it. A lot of the people who are picketing, of course, have nothing whatever to do with newspapers. They are people who have been dragged in, brought in, some of them even paid money to be there.
Okay, one final question. The new leader of the Labour Party is Kinnock, is it?
Mr. Neil Kinnock, a young man of about 40.
Any good?
He's an attractive young Welsh charmer with a tremendous flow of words, but he has yet to be tested. He has no experience of government work, but he has a lot going for him, Jack.
My thanks to you, Drew. Sorry to interrupt your work today, and regards to Jan and the family.
Anytime you want to report from London, give Brother Drew a ring.
The man in the top hat.
I don't see why we shouldn't do the Webster show as a regular thing. This would bring money to me in retirement, Jack.
Oh, you Webster, you.
Jan is laughing in the background.
That's my floor director, who's a bit of a loudmouth.
Okay?
Much obliged, Drew. Love to Jan. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Good old Drew. Cheap way to talk to your brother. Free for all after the break. Boy, when things go to pot in Britain, they go to pot, I'll tell you. However, I said a free-for-all today, and a free-for-all we will have. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
The free-for-all opens a door for me to get some ideas that I've had in regards to small business dealings here in British Columbia. And that's with regard to independent business, and I mean small business. We're not talking about the social credit idea of multi-million-dollar small business. We're talking about the mom-and-pop enterprises and restaurants, etc. The bottom line here is the upset that I have with the mall operators, such as Trizac and whoever operates Pacific Malls, taking 10% of the gross in addition to mall operating expenses and base rents from the merchants that try to operate a business. It's like an additional taxing situation, which at some points pushes people right out of business.
You're saying that if you sign a lease on a store in one of these fancy malls owned by Trizac or whatever, that part of your payment to them is 10% of your gross?
Well, that's the situation we were in, and they...
What about your lease payments?
Well, your lease payments, you have a baseline minimum rent. You have, in addition to that, mall operating expenses, and then you have a percentage, whichever is greater over the minimum base rent.
I see that.
In other words, you're taking in a 10% partner, like it or not.
But is it a base for your 10% gross, or does that always apply to your 10% gross?
It's your 10% gross.
It's always there.
It's always there.
It doesn't run above a minimum. It doesn't have a baseline.
Well, you have a baseline. Let's give you a situation like, say, you have 700 square feet and they charge you $850 a month for your base rent factor, and then they have, say, approximately $800 more for mall operating expenses, which is supposed to include security and lighting and cleanup and whatever. Now, if your income for a given month, let's say, is $20,000, then you pay $2,000 as your base rent, and your $800 in addition to that for your operating expenses.
And you also pay your general $800 maintenance.
Yes.
So you'd be paying $3,600 a month.
Close to it.
$20,000.
That's right. In addition to that, this is a tactic which is now being applied to. It doesn't have to be in a mall. There's the small landlords that own, say, the little corner building or something like that, are applying the same rules.
Oh, that's wicked.
It's wicked.
That is wicked.
It's ridiculous, and I've been trying to figure out a way to get this out and what could be done about it.
In a time of hysterical inflation, we can see everybody grabbing another piece of the pie, but that doesn't give the small businessman the slightest chance at all.
Well, it doesn't. And the thing is, in our particular case, we were in a particular mall that headquartered ICBC. When ICBC moved out, we lost 52% of our business because it was 1,200 employees from the tower were moved out.
And then, of course, the operating cost of that building would jump to the small leaseholders.
Every increase is passed on to the small leaseholder. Although you share the mall with some of the...
You're talking about the Royal Bank Mall, are you? The Royal Mall.
Yes, Royal Centre Mall.
Royal Centre Mall.
I put in 2 years, and I built the place up. I lost a fair amount of money when I sold it. I had to sell it at a loss just recently. And the bottom line is that I worked 2 years, lost money, and didn't get anything out of it. I luckily got out with being able to pay everybody off what I owed. However, the thing is, after we sell it, they open another, in our case we're doing in a small restaurant, they open another restaurant, and the mall already has 10 food outlets, and if you know the size of the mall we're talking about, it doesn't equate to the Pacific Center Mall, which has the same number of outlets with literally 200 times the traffic.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in Pacific Centre Mall, and it always seems to be busy.
Yes.
Whereas I go into Royal Centre Mall, and it always seems to be quiet.
Yes.
Well, that's fascinating. I'll tell you what, which line is he on? Give me your telephone number off the air, will you? Uh-huh. Good, just so I've got it in case the story develops. Much obliged. Thank you. Of course, again, as you say, that's free enterprise. You charge what the traffic will bear. But that does seem a bit brutal. Sorry, my fault. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster. I have a question that perhaps you can answer for me, and that is when the government allowed alcoholic beverage advertising on television, I thought it was supposed to be educational and not lifestyle. And what I'm seeing now is just totally lifestyle advertising. I wonder if you could tell me any more about this.
Macho to drink beer.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was supposed to be educational. There is a certain balance of anti-liquor advertising which appears, but it doesn't seem to appear with the same peak regularity as the liquor outlets.
Well, I thought when they tried to sell beer, for example, that seems to be the prime culprit, that wasn't supposed to be lifestyle. And yet we see all these hikers and swimmers and boaters and...
I bet it's all healthy.
Yeah, oh, is it?
No, I mean all the hiking and swimming and boating.
I see.
They don't show nightclubs, I don't think.
No, I don't think so.
Interesting, ma'am. I'm involved in the industry as such, and I don't have any control over the content. And I wish I didn't smoke and didn't drink, and then I could be more outspoken. Thank you. Not that I drink. Spency's Bridge. Good morning, Spency's Bridge.
Yes, good morning, Jack. How are you?
I'm good.
I would just like to talk a little bit about the shopping in Canada.
The which? The
shopping.
Shopping.
The shopping in the major stores mostly. I find that in Canada particularly, a lot of the stores, I'm not saying all of them because there are some good ones, but a lot of them, the clerks are very rude, they're very impatient, they're uncaring, they're abrupt, and they just don't seem to care whether you're in there shopping or if you're out playing hockey.
Okay, so they're underpaid, they're only part-time, they've got trouble at home, the old man's just left them, or she's just left the old man, they're single parents. I'm afraid that's merely just the price you pay for the kind of tense society in which we live. I made a dreadful fuss the other day in a certain store. I made it on principle, I won't name the store. Anyway, it was a franchise operation, and I went in and I bought a $100 battery, right? $100, I needed a big heavy-duty battery for my John Deere 350B, my toy. And I said, I'll pay you by check. And the guy says, oh, we have a check cashing policy, and it didn't register with me. Went down, and here's the manager. And I'd say, what's this check cashing policy? And he says, well, first of all, have you got a MasterCard or a Visa? Because we've got to stamp that, and you've got to fill in this. It was Canadian Tire. You got to fill in this before we'll take your check. Well, I very nearly walked out then and there. Here am I, with my check, with identification, buying $113 worth of goods, and they want to con me into filling in their credit card so that I get, when I get their credit card, I'll nip it up and throw it away. He was such a nice guy, I didn't want to make too big a scene. I said, look, on any other occasion, I'd walk out your store, you won't take my check properly identified, but I need the battery and I don't want to embarrass you. But that's the kind of policy to which I have a rooted objection. If they don't want to take my check, they can say, thank you very much, we're not going to sell you the battery. You know, but I went along with this and I filled it in kind of weekly, and when it comes, I'll tear up the credit card. They were delightful people in that Canadian Tire store. And I got a good buy, but I just want them to know that I don't like being blackjacked into filling forms for a credit card I don't want. And you also had to sign a little thing saying, anyone who knows about your credit may exchange information with each other. Bad policy. Thank you, ma'am. Break, ticket. I have a request this morning for a favourite segment of a programme. And for those who have got little tape recorders, feel free, either video or tape, feel free to record at the top of the next segment, Barbara Green Road. And I'll tell you why. Because I did a CBC radio interview the other night with my old friend Vicky Gabbro, who, considering she works for the CBC, is very bright indeed. And we slung in Barbara Green Road. And the crew in the studio were virtually rolling on the floor in paroxysms of hysterics. Now, you see, I thought every day in the country had heard Barbara Green Road. I was wrong, and there may be 100,000 people out there this morning who need a good laugh. So at the top of the next segment, we'll do Barbara Green Road, and I'll sit here and laugh my head off. In the meanwhile, a call from Powell River. Is this Alan Fotheringham?
No.
Oh, he was in Powell River yesterday.
Yeah.
Did you not know that?
Yeah.
Did you not have a guard of honor out for him?
No.
Oh, you should have had a guard of honor out for the little man. Tell me he sold 2 books.
Oh, yeah.
2 books in the bookstore. What's on your mind?
I want to know, last year you had on your show the guy they found in Stanley Park. I think his name was Luke.
Luke Coleman, a wonderful man who didn't know when he was born, really where he was born, who lived in a huge bus truck with the woman he thought was his sister, as she was. And he had this wonderful collection of music, and he couldn't read or couldn't write, and he was a delicate, friendly, delightful man. He vanished last, whenever it was, and has not been seen again.
Not been seen again?
No, I think Luke is long gone.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think he's in Canada. I think Luke is, to be quite honest, I think he's dead.
Okay, thank you very much.
Real tragedy. Such a delightful man. Gosh, yes, must remember that when we're doing one of our compilations, Steve. Go ahead, please.
Morning, Jack.
Morning.
Jack, I'm mad at the news media, including you, for allowing yourself to be fooled by this gang over in Victoria right now.
Since when was I fooled?
Oh, just yesterday.
How was I fooled?
Well, let me tell you.
Don't you tell me I was fooled unless you can give me a specific. I'm very clear-minded on the gang in Victoria.
All right, I tell you what you're allowing yourself to do. You present news releases from Victoria that are erroneous and false. Yesterday, for instance, we were told that this government is going to send us 1.1 million pamphlets to explain their restraint program at a cost of $185,000.
Correct.
Now, this was passed on. Nobody questioned the figures. Now, you figure out a 26-page pamphlet you produce, I would say costs at least 25 cents a piece. At 1.1 million, you figure it out, that's close to $300,000. Now,
now, if you'll just shut up for a minute, I'll tell you something.
Yeah.
We're given figures. It's 10-cent postage and 7 cents for the pamphlet. 1,088,000 pamphlets. The true and accurate figure, because I'm not going to call the government a liar on this. They have no reason to lie on it. It's a chintzy little booklet of the worst order. Not 25,000 people in British Columbia will read it, and it's a waste of $185,000 of the public money. Now go away. You know, he sees something somewhere and wants to blame the world on me. I'm not responsible for the world. I'm only responsible for wee Jackie Webster. Go ahead, please. Hello. Oh, open a telephone first. Talking to myself again. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I see that the RCMP are saying this morning that drugs are the biggest business in Canada. Now, you'll probably want me to go away, too.
No. We ran a series by Clive Jackson, which you kept popping out from behind giant marijuana bushes, which I am assured reliably are worth $3,000 to $5,000, and that people grow them hydroponically, and that it's not very difficult to avoid being caught, and that if you want to make money, get into the pot business.
Well, the
I don't know.
RCMP say that it's a $9 billion a year industry, not just pot, but all drugs, $9 billion.
Well, you may be right, you may not be right.
That's what the RCMP say this morning, and I think it's time that the MacDonald Commission on the inquiry look at that very seriously.
What do you want done?
Well, I think these drugs should be legalized. You know,
of course you do. Yes.
Well, it's
Yes.
marijuana is easier for young people to get than alcohol.
Oh, yes.
And if you just put it on shelves, it might be
Oh,
harder for
sure,
young
of
kids.
course. Wonderful. Lots of taxis from it. We could open brothels too. Have a free pot at the corner. We could give it out to the school children.
No,
Supply
Jack,
needles. No, the hell with you. I won't listen to that garbage. And I just won't listen to that garbage. I object to that attitude. Sook.
Yes, good morning, Jack.
Morning.
Mr. Webster, I'm a great fan of your show. I even lived in the Baudats for a while, 8 years. Jack, when is Parliament going to be recalled? Apparently this is a free-for-all program.
Which Parliament?
The local, the local legislature.
My own hunch is that you'll see it about March next year. Just about March next year, you see.
In view of the booklet that you've been waving around, which I came across yesterday, this is the straw that'll break the camel's back, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not of a Labour stripe, but I'm pretty well turning that way at the moment in reaction. This booklet is not going to be able to be discussed. It may be the smallest item on the budget, but I'm absolutely furious.
Well, let me tell you, I spot one mistake at once.
Yes?
Legislative package. The government's legislative package is intact. The government's legislative package is not intact.
Yes.
Bill 2 is dead.
Yes.
That's one inaccuracy I see here.
Yes. It's a propaganda piece, I know that.
Oh, total propaganda piece.
And we won't mention names, I know the guy who wrote it.
Did Doug Hill write it?
Beg your pardon?
Did Doug Hill write it?
No, I think Maurice Shazot wrote it.
Maurice Shazot?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, he's an employee of the provincial government and the information services. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, okay, fine. I've lived too long in Scotland to realize that all the blustering and all the filibustering, at least the House is kept open.
Correct.
At least there's an argument going on. At least somebody's talking about it. We have no chance in this province to even discuss this ridiculous measure which is being foisted upon us, or this ridiculous pamphlet which is being foisted upon us by a premier who says he got a lot of requests. I phoned his office and said I didn't request it and got cut off.
Look, I'll give you one little Webster victory which is admitted in the pamphlet. There was nothing but confusion about evicting the rentalsman, which was a total eviction. And I don't think some of Solidarity's spokesmen understood the rental situation, but in this pamphlet they do say,
yes,
responding to concerns, tenants and landlords, the government is considering amendments to the new Residential Tenancy Act to improve the process for settlement of landlord-tenant disputes. And it was old Webster that said to Bennett, we knew you were going to cancel controls. We knew there wasn't going to be any rent review, but you've got to keep the mediation services so that landlords and tenants are protected and so that the courts are not jammed with actions which would take years to settle. That's one thing they have reported accurately in here, but I don't think they ever understood it.
No, aye.
Prior to now. No, I'll go through this in detail and tell you if it's worthwhile talking about.
Please, because I think your program is absolutely splendid, and it's about the only parliament we've got at the moment.
Oh, give me that,
Yeah, what do you want?
No, I'm talking to my staff.
Yes, of course.
The blue book and the documents. The blue book and the documents. Do you know the blue book I mean?
Yeah.
The one...
I'm a media man myself, Jack, so
You are.
and I'm pretty steeped up.
I'll do that in a minute. How much time have I got in this segment? I'll take thanks anyway, I'll buy. Go ahead from Merritt.
Hello,
Yeah.
this is from Kamloops.
Oh, Kamloops is it? Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. I'm calling about the insistence of Heinrich that the teachers make up their strike time. And by the same token, I wonder if we as taxpayers who pay the politicians, pay the Socreds, should not insist that they make up their 2 weeks period of time that they spent at home that they called a cooling off period. And maybe some of them were busy, some of them were having a nice holiday, particularly in places like Kelowna. Now, wouldn't the same apply? We pay their salaries the same as the teachers' salaries.
Ma'am, it's a good thought and well expressed. It will not be done, you see.
No, it won't, but I'd just like to...
I think that the government's attitude on this making up time is chintzy, cheap, and picayune. because
I agree with you.
it punishes those teachers who went to work or wanted to go to work. I think the government's right in saying the money, and the agreement is that the money shall stay in the system,
Yes.
but to create perhaps another unnecessary uproar with this 188-day nonsense is stupid. Because as we all know, as a woman from Cranbrook called me and told me, when it's 30 below in Cranbrook, you close the schools.
That's right.
When the Queen comes, you close the schools.
Right, and they miss 3 days or more.
So what difference would it make? Much obliged. After the break.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Is this Mr. Webster?
Yes, madam.
I was told that you might help me find an address of the, I think you were...
10-second count into Barbara Green Road if you're going to tape it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Is this Mr. Webster?
Yes, madam.
I was told that you might help me find an address of the, I think you were interviewing Mr. Charlie Hunter, were you not? The editor of Longman's Publishing Company?
I am at this very moment, Mr. Curly Hunter.
Oh, Curly Hunter.
I call him Curly because he's as bald as a coot.
Oh, a friend of mine told me. Oh, that's funny.
Well, aren't you listening to the radio, ma'am?
I want to know where...
Aren't you listening to the radio?
Yes. Yes.
You are you?
Yes. Well, my friend told me to call you. I wanted to get this number of Charlie Hunter.
Curly Hunter, ma'am.
Oh.
He's as bald as a coot.
Oh.
55 Barber Green Road. Funny enough, Barber Green Road. He hasn't been in a barber's in years. 55 Barber Green Road, Don Mills, Ontario.
That's the address?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you spell that?
Barber, as in hairdresser.
Oh, barber?
Yes, barber. I can't say it the way you do, ma'am.
Oh.
My glottal stops are too prominent.
Oh. Barber?
Barber Green Road.
How do you spell that? Green?
Yes, as in pink. Green.
E-R-W-N?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that the road?
That's the road.
That's the address?
Yes, madam.
What a strange address.
Isn't it?
Yes.
He's a strange man.
And what is Barber?
That's the name of the road.
Oh, Barber Green Road?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, that's the road. Oh,
yes, of course it is.
Oh, what a long name.
Yes, isn't it?
And he's bald.
Oh, bald as a coot.
Tell me, son. Tell me again. How do you spell that name?
Curly Hunter, Barber Green Road, Don Mills, Ontario.
Ontario?
Don Mills.
What's Odd Mills?
Dawn. You know when the sun comes up like thunder?
Sure, that's my name.
That's dawn. What, son of thunder?
Dawn. Dawn is my name.
Dawn. Well, D-O-N, as in Don Juan. Don Juan. Don Juan.
Juan?
Don Mills.
Mills?
M-I-L-L-S, as in flower.
Yes, Don Mills.
Mills.
Is that his name?
No, that's the name of the house.
What? What? Oh, I'm awfully muddled, aren't I?
You're delightful. You and I must do a comedy act on the stage sometime.
Yes, I have done that sometimes.
I think you're pulling my leg. That's what you're doing.
Huh?
You're pulling my leg.
No, I'm not.
Okay, let's start again.
Yes.
Curly Hunter.
Charlie Hunter.
Curly.
How do you spell that?
C-U-R-L-Y. Curly. He's as bald.
I don't seem able to get that.
Curly Hunter. 55 Barber Green Road, Don Mills, Ontario.
Oh, my, now I've got to.
You phone the girl at the switchboard and she'll tell you. Thanks for calling, ma'am. Oh, my.
Kathy. Dennison. Kathy, I'm sorry I forgot your second name. Kathy did the graphics for that. They're just terrific. Now, while we're laughing, I'm being haunted by Fred Bass of the health department to stop smoking. You saw the weightlifter, now you see what it turned up in my studio this morning at 8:05.
All my conditions.
Okay. Okay. Come on over. Gorgeous. Are you a legitimate belly dancer?
Yes, I am.
You certainly have a beautiful belly.
Because I don't smoke.
You don't smoke, is that why? Your name, please.
Delilah.
Delilah. Well, I ain't Samson. Are you from Vancouver?
I'm from Montreal.
Montreal?
Yeah.
Who engaged you for this engagement this morning?
Well, this gentleman here.
Fred Bass.
Yeah.
Dreadful man, isn't he? Is this the first time you've belly danced at 8:05 in the morning?
Yes.
It is, isn't it?
This lady is volunteering out of community spirit and her interest in health and whatnot to come in here and dance like
You're
this.
going to win if you keep this up. My wife got our vase of flowers yesterday. You sent them, didn't you?
No, I didn't.
Oh, my wife is an admirer I don't know about. There was no name on the card, and I thought, because she has not smoked, you see.
Good for her. Good for her.
But I'm doing not too badly. And with encouragement like this, anybody can stop anything. But I might take up something else instead, which might be just as dangerous to my health. Thank you very much, Delilah.
You're welcome.
Very much.
Pleasure meeting you.
Fred, I'm doing not too badly.
Good, good, good. Hang in there.
I'm hanging in. I'm doing my best. I'm chewing this disgusting licorice stick.
Okay, more noodles, a little bit less licorice stick. You have to paste the licorice.
I
Okay?
can't stand the noodles.
Can't stand the noodles. Okay.
It's fattening.
They are fattening, yeah.
January 11th.
January 11th. Yeah. Cold
I never
Turkey
know
Day.
when you're going to turn up for Cold Turkey Day. Delilah, you're gorgeous, beautiful. Where do you work in town? Where do you dance?
I'm working at the Yanis restaurant.
Yanis?
Yeah, on Robson and Cordero.
Robson and Cordero.
Yeah.
Must come and see you sometime. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Fred. I'm
You're welcome.
trying. Honest to God, I'm trying. Oh, yeah, let me see something, please. It's my program. Back after the break with, I think, a rapidly breaking news development in the Teachers' Operation Solidarity caper from Jack Monroe. I'm waiting for a thumbs up from our downtown microwave feed on the BC Fed meeting this morning. Some statement coming from Jack Monroe, which I'm very anxious to see, as I'm sure you are. In the meantime, I've got to stay on the phones. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, me?
That's you.
Hello, Jack.
Yeah.
You're in real good form this morning.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I want to ask you one thing,
Yep.
and I think you'll know.
Mm-hmm.
This has to pertain to the teachers and what is the population of Abbotsford and Clearwater?
I don't know.
Don't know?
No.
What would you say, offhand?
Abbotsford's probably about 15, 16, 20,000. Clearwater's probably about 900. Go on, what's your point?
Okay. I'll tell you why I asked. On your program before, they had 700 and some odd teachers, and they cut them back to 600 and something.
Well, you got to have the figures in front of you before that makes any sense. It can't carry on with that conversation in the dark. Go ahead, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
My question goes back to July 7th, Black Thursday.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what the answer to this is. I think, in my opinion, any 4 to 6-year-old, or even perhaps a Jim Hume, would expect what the government did to stimulate the exact same response it did. And to me, knowing this, it had to be an irresponsible act on their part. Now they come out with this book to sort of justify their action. And it was a deliberate act, you know. And as I say, any fool would know.
If you remember back to September 6th when I came back on the air, I analyzed and I'd spent some time on the legislation, and I was appalled by Bill 2 right off the bat. And we pointed out that Mr. Bennett had not released any of those particular plans, but merely talked generally about restraint and wage freezes. And I think you're right that no matter what he has done, he certainly was not fully frank with us in any way, shape, or form prior to the election.
But why did they want to stir the province up like this? Because this is my point. They had to know that this was going to be the result of it.
Well, that was a deliberate move to the right by social credit, which had gone along with all the NDP policies in the main for 7 years, and which had sat on its thumbs doing nothing for 7 months of the new government. And then we had that disgraceful behavior in the House from all sides, just appalling behavior in the House. We had the restriction of the press into its traditional galleries. I think the government's behavior at that time was appalling.
That's dangerous.
And I don't think the opposition did much better, but the media must take some of the blame too, because there has been a distinct drop in reporting in the print media, which is all important, about what happened in that House.
Yeah, again, that's dangerous, Jack. And I think
Dangerous. Yeah, I know it's bad, but I'm just waiting for a thumbs up on Monroe. Are we going to get him or we're not going to get him? Does anybody know? Nobody knows yet. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
My question is in relation to something that was brought up earlier in your program by your brother, and that is with regards to the unions having their money being frozen.
Yes, £11 million.
Is it possible to be done in Canada?
Yes.
And for the same reasons?
Yes.
Who? Has it ever been done?
Yes.
Was that the QP?
No.
Or should I say the postal workers?
I think it was way back in the 40s with the IWA where funds were seized from one union, but that was an inter-union fight. I can't remember, but it's obviously possible entirely the same here as there. From Seattle, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were asked a question about the Indian chief you had on earlier, about did he harbor Bob Sataikum, the person who escaped from Washington and ran across Canada from New Brunswick and up.
No, he's somewhere hiding in the Northwest Territories. He has not been in British Columbia. Thanks for your call. I haven't time.
I heard he could have been in Kamloops at one time.
He was, but he doesn't know him. He's not involved in that kind of thing. I think we're going to a live feed of Jack Monroe. Or a break first. Take a break. Statement by Jack Monroe on the teachers' crisis after a BC Fed meeting this morning.
Emergency resolution. Whereas the provincial government has already breached the agreement reached with Operation Solidarity on November 13, 1983, by allowing reprisals against education sector workers, and whereas the provincial government has further breached the same agreement by announcing that funds accumulate by school boards as a result of November job action must be returned to the provincial government, and whereas the provincial government is attempting to reward scabs by punishing those workers who respect picket lines and demonstrated sound trade union principles, Now therefore be it resolved that the Public Sector Committee be instructed to bring forth a program of job action to the Federation's Executive Council of Operation Solidarity, and be it further resolved that this program include job action involving all affiliates of Operation Solidarity, and be it further resolved that this program of job action be implemented if any educational worker is fired or laid off as a direct result of the monies and wages saved during the strike not being returned to local education systems, and be it finally resolved that the Public Sector Committee develop their plan of action within 7 days following this convention. The committee
Yeah, no, leave it there. That's all I want of it. Job action. Monroe describes those teachers who went to work as scabs. Monroe now interprets the Monroe Agreement, the Kelowna Agreement, that if the money is not, in effect, used to save teachers' jobs, there will be job action. Now, what extent of job action, nobody knows. The Noon News will follow in detail. The 6 will give you the full detail, and I'll have to deal with it again tomorrow morning after I speak to Mark Lalonde, the Minister of Finance for the federal government in Ottawa. Big stuff, whatever it is. We've now got to find out what it means. I'll be back tomorrow, 9:29 a.m. Who's got 30 seconds? What did he say? Yeah. He says job action will be recommended, and any union that does not go along with the job action will be in trouble with the BC Federation of Labour. And he says that Bennett has broken the Kelowna Agreement of November the 13th, 1983. And that obviously poses great problems. It's a surprising development this morning. As I say, we'll bring you up to date. I'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. precisely.